The unlikely recruit. The worst day gets worse. Tommy Mitchell was having the worst day of his life, which was saying something considering he'd been kicked out of the Galactic Space Academy 3 years ago for lack of strategic thinking and general incompetence. Today, he was elbow-deep in the waste recycling system of Orbital Mining Station Beta 7, trying to figure out why it kept backing up every few hours. "Stupid piece of junk," he muttered, wrestling with a particularly stubborn pipe joint. His maintenance uniform was already stained with things he preferred not to identify. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd once dreamed of commanding starships, and now he was literally dealing with other people's waste. The station's alarms suddenly began blaring, red lights flashing everywhere. Tommy's first thought was that he'd somehow broken the recycling system worse than it already was. His second thought was interrupted by the station's intercom crackling to life. "All personnel to emergency evacuation pods. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to emergency evacuation pods immediately." The mix-up that changed everything. Tommy dropped his wrench and ran toward the nearest evacuation pod bay, his boots slipping on the metal grating. The corridors were filled with panicked miners and station staff, all pushing toward the same destination. Through the station's viewports, he could see massive alien ships approaching, their hulls gleaming silver against the star field. When he reached Pod Bay 7, most of the pods were already gone. Only one remained, and standing next to it was something that made Tommy's jaw drop. The alien was easily 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished obsidian. Its eyes glowed a soft blue, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like gravel being mixed in a cement mixer. "You are Strategic Commander Thomas Mitchell, designation 7745 Alpha, the alien asked, consulting what looked like a holographic clipboard. Tommy blinked. No, I'm Tommy Mitchell, designation 7745 Beta. I'm a janitor." The alien's 4 arms moved in what might have been a shrug. "Close enough. Time is short. You will come with us." "Wait, what? I think there's been some mistake. I'm nobody special. I clean toilets for a living. The accidental hero." Before Tommy could protest further, the alien had picked him up with 2 of its arms and carried him into the pod. The evacuation craft was clearly not designed for human comfort. Everything was too big, too angular, and the seats felt like they were made from recycled asteroid rock. "I'm telling you, this is a mistake," Tommy said as the pod launched from the station. "I'm the guy who got kicked out of the academy for suggesting we could win wars by confusing the enemy with interpretive dance." The alien turned its glowing eyes toward him. "Interpretive dance strategy. Yes, this is noted in your file. Very unconventional. Very human." Tommy watched through the pod's viewport as Mining Station Beta 7 grew smaller behind them. "My file? What file? I don't have a file. I have a disciplinary record and a really bad credit rating, but I don't have a file." "All humans have files," the alien said. "Yours is particularly interesting. Expelled from academy for thinking outside acceptable parameters. Employed in waste management for 3 years. Survived 17 equipment failures that should have been fatal. Demonstrates unusual problem solving under pressure." That's not problem solving, that's just being too stubborn to die. The bigger picture. As their pod approached the massive alien mothership, Tommy got his first real look at what was happening. The mining station hadn't been evacuated because of an accident or malfunction. It was being evacuated because something was coming. Something that had the alien scared enough to recruit random humans. The docking bay of the alien ship was enormous, filled with dozens of other evacuation pods and what looked like military craft from 100 different species. Tommy had never seen so many different types of aliens in one place. Some looked almost human, others were clearly from worlds where evolution had taken very different paths. "Okay, let me get this straight," Tommy said as they disembarked. You guys are so desperate that you're recruiting failed academy washouts and janitors? The alien's 4 arms moved in what was definitely a shrug this time. Desperate times require desperate measures. Conventional military thinking has failed. We need human unconventional thinking. But I'm not even good at unconventional thinking. I'm just bad at conventional thinking. Perhaps, the alien said, that is exactly what we need. Tommy looked around at the bustling alien ship, at the dozens of species working together, at the obvious signs of military preparation. Whatever was coming, it was big enough to unite natural enemies and desperate enough to make them recruit the galaxy's biggest failures. So what exactly are we up against? He asked. The alien's glowing eyes dimmed slightly. Something that has never been defeated. Something that consumes entire star systems. Something that our greatest military minds cannot comprehend or combat. Tommy felt a familiar sensation in his stomach, the same one he'd felt right before every major disaster in his life. And you think I can help with that? We think, the alien said, that you might be our only hope. As they walked deeper into the ship, Tommy couldn't shake the feeling that this was either going to be the greatest adventure of his life or the most spectacular failure in galactic history. Knowing his luck, it would probably be both. The Galactic Council's desperation. Meeting the real players. The Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime were exactly what Tommy had imagined the United Nations would look like if it had been designed by aliens with a serious case of architectural overcompensation. The dome stretched impossibly high, with floating platforms for representatives from hundreds of different worlds. Tommy sat in what was clearly the Observer section, which was basically the galactic equivalent of the kids' table. "Mitchell, is that really you?" a familiar voice called out. Tommy turned to see General Marcus Kane approaching, his military uniform crisp despite the obvious stress lines around his eyes. Kane had been 2 years ahead of Tommy at the academy, back when Tommy still thought he might actually make something of himself. "Hey, Marcus," Tommy said, trying to sound casual despite the fact that he was sitting in the most important political building in the galaxy wearing a janitor's uniform that still smelled faintly of recycled air filters. "Fancy meeting you here." General Kane shook his head in amazement. "When I heard they were bringing in strategic consultants, I never imagined they'd drag you out of whatever hole you'd crawled into." "No offense. None taken. I've been living in several holes, actually. Mostly maintenance shafts. The threat nobody could stop." The council session began with a holographic display that made Tommy's stomach drop. The image showed star system after star system simply disappearing. Not destroyed, not conquered, just gone, leaving behind empty space where entire civilizations had once thrived. "The Devourers," announced the council speaker, a floating jellyfish-like creature with a voice like wind chimes in a hurricane. "They have consumed 47 star systems in the past galactic year. Our best military strategists have analyzed their patterns, their technology, their methods. Every engagement has ended in complete defeat." Tommy watched the tactical displays showing massive black ships that seemed to absorb light itself. Conventional weapons simply disappeared when they hit the hulls. Entire fleets had been swallowed up like they were nothing more than appetizers. "What about evacuation?" asked a reptilian representative. "Surely we can save some populations?" "Negative." General Kane stepped forward to address the council. "The Devourers don't just consume matter. They seem to consume space itself. There's no outrunning them once they arrive in a system. We have perhaps 6 months before they reach the core worlds." The desperate gambit. Tommy raised his hand, immediately regretting it when every eye, tentacle, and sensory organ in the chamber turned toward him. Excuse me, but why exactly am I here? I mean, I appreciate the free trip to Nexus Prime, but I'm pretty sure you didn't recruit me for my strategic brilliance." The obsidian alien who had brought him here stepped forward. "Human tactical thinking is unique. Conventional military doctrine has failed completely. We require unconventional approaches." "But I'm not tactical," Tommy protested. I'm the guy who once got trapped in a supply closet for 8 hours because I couldn't figure out that the door was a hologram. Exactly, said the jellyfish speaker. Your academy records show consistent failure to follow established protocols. You think in ways that make no sense to military planners. General Kane looked uncomfortable. Mitchell, with all due respect, what they're asking for is impossible. We're talking about an enemy that has defeated every military force in the galaxy. The Devourers don't follow any known rules of warfare. Maybe that's the problem, Tommy said, surprising himself. Maybe we're trying to fight them like they're just another military force. The spark of an idea. The chamber fell silent. Tommy could feel hundreds of alien minds focused on him, waiting for him to say something profound or at least not completely stupid. Unfortunately, he had no idea what that something might be. Go on, the jellyfish speaker prompted. Well, I don't actually have a plan or anything. But when the waste recycling system on Beta 7 kept backing up, I tried everything by the book. Changed filters, adjusted pressure, ran diagnostics. Nothing worked. You know what finally fixed it? What? General Kane asked, though he looked like he already regretted the question. I reversed the flow. Instead of trying to push the waste through the system, I pulled it backward. The blockage wasn't where I thought it was. It was in the intake valve, not the output. The chamber erupted in confused chittering and clicking. Several translators sparked and gave up trying to convert the discussion into standard galactic. Are you suggesting, said a tall, crystalline being, that we should run away from the Devourers? No, that's not what I mean. Tommy stood up, his mind racing. Maybe the problem isn't that we can't hurt them. Maybe the problem is that we're attacking them where they're strongest instead of where they're weakest. The unconventional approach. Explain, the jellyfish speaker demanded. Tommy looked around the chamber, at all the brilliant military minds and advanced civilizations that had tried and failed to stop the Devourers. Okay, so they consume matter and energy, right? And they seem to eat space itself. But what if that's not actually what they're doing? What if they're just really, really good at something else, and we're interpreting it wrong? Such as, General Kane asked. I don't know. I'm a janitor, not a physicist. But every time I've fixed something that everyone else said was broken, it turned out the problem wasn't what we thought it was. Maybe the Devourers aren't actually devouring anything. Maybe they're just moving it somewhere else. The obsidian alien's 4 arms moved in what Tommy was beginning to recognize as excitement. Dimensional displacement. Theoretical possibility. But our sensors show complete annihilation. Your sensors show what they're designed to detect, Tommy said. But what if the Devourers are operating on principles your sensors can't measure? General Kane frowned. Even if that were true, how would that help us? We still can't fight them. Maybe we don't fight them, Tommy said. Maybe we figure out where they're putting everything and ask them to put it back. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Then, slowly, the jellyfish speaker began to pulse with a soft, rhythmic light. The human, it announced, will be given full access to our tactical databases and a research team. If conventional wisdom has failed, perhaps conventional wisdom is the problem. As the council session ended and aliens began filing out, General Kane put a hand on Tommy's shoulder. Mitchell, I hope you know what you're doing. Because if you're wrong, there won't be a galaxy left to clean toilets in. Tommy looked out through the chamber's massive windows at the star field beyond. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were consuming entire civilizations. And somehow, a failed janitor was supposed to stop them. Marcus, he said quietly, I've never known what I was doing. But somehow, things usually work out. Usually isn't good enough this time. No, Tommy agreed. But it's all we've got. The impossible plan. The war room nightmare. The war room aboard the flagship Horizon was a temple to military precision. Holographic displays showed real-time positions of every ship in the Galactic Defense Fleet, tactical readouts scrolled past in 17 different languages, and the air hummed with the tension of beings who knew they were fighting an unwinnable war. Tommy sat at a conference table that was clearly designed for species with more limbs than humans possessed, trying to make sense of data that would have made his academy professors weep with joy. 3 weeks of research had given him access to more military intelligence than most generals saw in their entire careers. "So," said Admiral Reginald Cross, a tall alien with skin like polished copper and eyes that seemed to see through everything, "the human janitor believes he can accomplish what our finest military minds cannot." "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of arrogant," Tommy said, adjusting his new uniform. The Galactic Council had insisted he look the part of a strategic advisor, even though he still felt like a fraud. "But yeah, I think I might have something." Admiral Cross's expression could have frozen hydrogen. "Enlighten us." "The theory that changed everything." Tommy stood up and activated the holographic display, showing the pattern of Devourer attacks over the past year. "Okay, so everyone's been assuming that the Devourers are just really good at destroying things. But look at this." The display showed the consumed star systems, but instead of focusing on what was gone, Tommy had mapped what was left behind. Empty space, yes, but empty space with very specific characteristics. "The quantum signature of the void areas," Tommy continued, "it's not random. There's a pattern. The space isn't just empty, it's been folded." Folded? General Kane, who had been assigned as Tommy's military liaison, looked skeptical. "Space doesn't fold. It curves, it warps, but it doesn't fold." "That's what I thought too. But then I remembered something from my failed physics classes. Origami." The silence in the room was deafening. Several alien officers exchanged glances that clearly said they were wondering if the human had suffered some kind of mental breakdown. "Origami," Admiral Cross repeated flatly. "Yeah, paper folding. When you fold a piece of paper, you're not destroying the paper, you're just putting it somewhere else. The paper still exists, it's just in a different configuration." The impossible possibility. Tommy manipulated the display, showing how the quantum signatures aligned with theoretical dimensional fold patterns. What if the Devourers aren't destroying star systems? What if they're just storing them somewhere else? Like folding them into higher dimensional space? "That's completely impossible," said Commander Zaravas, the Horizon's chief science officer. "The energy requirements alone would be astronomical." "Would they?" Tommy asked. "Or would they just require a completely different understanding of physics than we have?" He pulled up another display, showing the Devourers' movement patterns. "Look at how they travel. They don't use hyperspace or wormholes like we do. They just appear. What if they're not actually moving through space at all? What if they're moving through dimensions we can't even perceive?" Admiral Cross leaned forward. "Even if your theory were correct, how would that help us? We still can't fight beings that exist in higher dimensions." "Maybe we don't have to fight them," Tommy said. "Maybe we just have to talk to them. The plan that shouldn't work." The room erupted in protests. Aliens chittered, clicked, and made sounds that Tommy's translator couldn't even process. General Kane looked like he was developing a migraine. "You want to negotiate with the Devourers?" Admiral Cross's voice was dangerously quiet. "Think about it," Tommy said, raising his voice over the chaos. "Every species we've encountered has been willing to communicate. The Devourers are the first ones who haven't even tried. What if it's not because they're hostile? What if it's because they literally can't perceive us well enough to realize we're trying to talk to them?" "Explain," Commander Voss demanded. "Okay, imagine you're walking through a forest and you accidentally step on an anthill. The ants are probably freaking out, thinking you're some kind of unstoppable destroyer. But you're not trying to hurt them, you just didn't notice them. What if we're the ants?" Tommy manipulated the display again, showing the theoretical dimensional layers. What if the devourers are just cleaning up? What if they're maintenance workers for higher dimensional space, and star systems are just debris that's fallen into our reality? The desperate gambit. That's insane, General Kane said. So was using a plunger to fix a quantum flux regulator, Tommy replied. But it worked. Admiral Cross was quiet for a long moment, studying the displays. Assuming your theory is correct, how would we communicate with beings that exist in higher dimensions? We get their attention, Tommy said. And we do it in a way that makes it clear we're intelligent, not just random debris. How? Tommy grinned, and for the first time since this whole mess started, he felt like he knew what he was doing. We fold something back. The room fell silent again. Commander Voss was the first to speak. You want to reverse the dimensional fold? Do you have any idea how much energy that would require? Less than you'd think, Tommy said. Because we're not trying to unfold an entire star system. We're just trying to unfold a small piece of it. Something that would be obviously artificial. Something that would prove we understand what's happening. And if you're wrong, Admiral Cross asked. Then we're no worse off than we are now. The devourers will finish consuming the galaxy, and we'll all be dead anyway. The point of no return. General Kane stood up. Mitchell, this is the most ridiculous plan I've ever heard. It's based on wild speculation, untested theories, and the assumption that universe-consuming entities are actually janitors from a higher dimension. Yep, Tommy agreed cheerfully. It also happens to be the only plan that doesn't involve us all dying horribly in the next few months. Also yep. Admiral Cross looked around the room at his officers, then back at Tommy. How long would you need to prepare this dimensional communication attempt? Assuming I can get the resources and a ship that won't fall apart the moment we try to fold space? About 2 weeks. You realize, the Admiral said slowly, that if this goes wrong, you could tear a hole in reality itself. Tommy shrugged. Admiral, I once accidentally created a small black hole while trying to fix a coffee machine. Reality's tougher than you think. For the first time since Tommy had met him, Admiral Cross actually smiled. Very well, human janitor. You have your resources. Try not to destroy the universe. As the meeting broke up and officers began filing out, General Kane remained behind. Mitchell, I hope you're right about this. Because if you're wrong. I know, Tommy said quietly, but Marcus, what if I'm right? What if all of this could have been avoided if someone had just thought to ask the devourers what they were doing? That, General Kane said, would be the most human thing imaginable. The battle begins. The unlikely alliance. 2 weeks later, Tommy found himself standing on the bridge of the experimental vessel, Second Chance, a ship that had been cobbled together from parts of 12 different alien technologies. It was possibly the ugliest spacecraft ever built, but it was also the only one equipped with the dimensional folding apparatus that Tommy's insane plan required. Mitchell, please tell me you know what you're doing, said Captain Ben Rodriguez, Tommy's former academy roommate who had somehow ended up as the pilot for this suicide mission. Ben had always been the responsible one, the one who actually graduated and became a proper starship captain. Now he was risking his career on his failure of a friend. Ben, I've never known what I was doing, Tommy replied, checking the readings on equipment he barely understood. But I've gotten really good at making it up as I go along. The bridge crew was a mixture of humans and aliens, all volunteers who had either believed in Tommy's theory or had nothing left to lose. The asteroid belt where they were conducting the test was far enough from inhabited worlds that if things went catastrophically wrong, they'd only kill themselves. Dimensional fold generator is online, reported Lieutenant Dana Foster, the ship's chief engineer. Though I should mention that according to every physics textbook ever written, this should be impossible. That's what makes it fun, Tommy said, though his stomach was doing somersaults. The first attempt. The test target was a small asteroid, nothing more than a chunk of rock about the size of a city block. If Tommy's theory was correct, they should be able to fold it into higher dimensional space and then unfold it back into normal reality. Initiating dimensional fold sequence, Tommy announced, his hand hovering over the activation switch. If this goes wrong, it's been nice knowing you all. That's not reassuring, Captain Rodriguez muttered. Tommy pressed the switch. The asteroid disappeared. Not destroyed, not vaporized, it simply ceased to exist in their reality. The space where it had been was empty, but the quantum readings showed the same signature they detected in the areas where the Devourers had consumed star systems. Phase 1 successful, Lieutenant Foster announced, though she sounded more terrified than celebratory. The asteroid has been folded into higher dimensional space. Now comes the hard part, Tommy said. Bringing it back. The moment of truth. The unfold sequence was far more complex than the fold. Tommy had to essentially reverse the dimensional equations while maintaining quantum coherence across multiple reality layers. It was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while blindfolded and riding a roller coaster. Readings are all over the place, Lieutenant Foster reported. Quantum stability is fluctuating wildly. That's normal, Tommy said, though he had no idea if it was normal or not. Probably. Captain Rodriguez was monitoring the long-range sensors. Mitchell, we've got company. 3 Devourer ships just appeared at the edge of the system. Tommy's blood ran cold. How long until they reach us? At their current speed, about 20 minutes. Perfect. That gives us just enough time to either save the galaxy or accidentally destroy it. The unexpected response. As Tommy worked frantically to complete the unfold sequence, something strange happened. The Devourer ships didn't attack. Instead, they simply stopped. They hung in space, apparently watching the Second Chance's efforts to manipulate dimensional space. They're not moving, Captain Rodriguez reported. They're just sitting there. Maybe they're curious, Tommy suggested, sweat beading on his forehead as he adjusted the dimensional parameters. Or maybe they're waiting to see if we blow ourselves up. Unfold sequence at 70% completion, Lieutenant Foster announced. Quantum coherence is holding. Suddenly, the asteroid reappeared. Not destroyed, not changed, exactly as it had been before the fold. But there was something else. Attached to the asteroid was a small, crystalline structure that definitely hadn't been there before. What is that? Captain Rodriguez asked. Tommy stared at the readings. I think it's a message. The communication. The crystalline structure was emitting a complex pattern of quantum fluctuations that the ship's computers were slowly translating into mathematical concepts. As the translation progressed, Tommy realized that his wildest theory had been correct. They're not destroyers, he said quietly. They're gardeners. What? Lieutenant Foster looked up from her readings. The Devourers. They're not consuming star systems. They're harvesting them. The quantum signature shows that the folded space is being moved to a higher dimensional preserve. They're trying to save civilizations from some kind of universal catastrophe. Captain Rodriguez checked the long-range sensors again. The Devourer ships are moving. They're coming toward us, but slowly. Almost like they're approaching cautiously. They are, Tommy realized. They're being careful not to scare us. They've been trying to save everyone, but they couldn't communicate with us. We were too small. Too limited to understand what they were doing. The real enemy. As the translation of the crystalline message continued, a horrifying picture emerged. The Devourers weren't the enemy, they were trying to protect the galaxy from something far worse. A wave of entropy that was spreading through the universe, literally unmaking reality itself. The unfold process, Tommy said, reading the translated message. They're trying to tell us that everything they've consumed is being stored in a safe dimensional space until the entropy wave passes. How long? Captain Rodriguez asked. According to this, about 50 years. Then they'll unfold everything back into normal space. Lieutenant Foster looked up from her readings. So they've been trying to save us this whole time? Not trying, Tommy corrected. Succeeding. They just couldn't explain what they were doing because we couldn't perceive their communication methods. The lead Devourer ship was now close enough that they could see its true size. It was massive beyond comprehension, but instead of the menacing destroyer they'd imagined, it looked almost protective. Like a giant shield floating in space. Incoming communication, Captain Rodriguez announced. But it's not coming through our normal channels. Put it through the dimensional fold translator, Tommy suggested. The revelation. The message that came through was simple but profound: small ones understand. Small ones help. Together, we save all. Tommy looked around the bridge at his crew, at the beings who had trusted him with their lives based on nothing more than a janitor's hunch about cosmic plumbing. Send a response, he said. Tell them we understand. Tell them we want to help. As the message was transmitted, Tommy felt something he'd never experienced before, the satisfaction of solving a problem that actually mattered. Not just fixing a broken toilet or unclogging a waste recycler, but helping to save entire civilizations. The other Devourer ships are changing course, Captain Rodriguez reported. They're heading back toward the core worlds. To continue the evacuation, Tommy realized. But now they know we understand. They can coordinate with us. Lieutenant Foster was monitoring the quantum readings. Tommy, if your theory is right, we just prevented the biggest misunderstanding in galactic history. Not prevented, Tommy corrected. Fixed. Just like everything else, it just needed someone to look at it from a different angle. As the second chance turned toward home, carrying news that would change everything, Tommy couldn't help but smile. Maybe being a failure at conventional thinking wasn't such a bad thing after all. Sometimes the galaxy needed someone who was willing to think like a janitor instead of a general. Ben, he said to his old roommate, I think this is going to be a good day. For once, Mitchell, I think you might be right.